And if you are watching on those platforms like Facebook or Twitter, you'll see the comments that show up on Facebook or Twitter. But if you are on haps.tv, you'll see all the comments from all the different platforms come into the same space. So we're very lucky right now because I'm returning to live broadcast after a long time away. I used to live broadcast a lot on Periscope, which was Twitter's broadcasting platform. But when it got shut down, I moved over to Haps thanks to some very generous recommendations from people because I love Haps. And now I'm broadcasting on Haps. So previously on Periscope, it was when I was broadcasting before, maybe a year or two ago. Was it a year or two ago? Was it more? Oh my gosh. It got quite busy. There were quite a lot of comments. It sometimes was devolving into hilarious troll fest. It was sometimes devolving into just hilarious joke fests. And it was sometimes evolving into really enriching, hilarious conversations about all these different people's experience in all these different areas. So since then, I have decided to spend my time and devote my life to creating a social enterprise in the area of financial literacy. This company and this brand is going to be called MoneyMind, and it was created in concept quite a few years ago, but it has been coming closer and closer into life and been in building for the last, well, like over a year maybe, actually. So it's been there sort of putting the pieces into place and just, I had a fashion brand before, and I decided to step away from that fashion brand and start to wind it down this year, and focus more of my time onto building this social enterprise. And so it was a very difficult decision for me to decide, okay, I think it's time for me to put aside that absolutely fantastic fashion brand that I had. It was Hong Kong's first luxury corsetry brand because I love corsetry and I love Victorian fashion. And so I decided that I was going to put that aside. It did very well. It was a lovely little hobbyist boutique business. It was on Asia's Next Top Model and on the magazine covers, and I really loved the corsets and people love the corsets. But I decided that financial literacy was a topic that was both very dear to my heart and really important to address right now, and that I didn't see that many people taking steps into this space to be able to educate, spread the word, talk about, and encourage empowerment in this area. And it just, I think when I started to progress in my own financial and investing journey, I realized that, which I've been in for many years, because I started working in media since I was 17 years old and was investing quite young too, haphazardly. I realized that with the change into digital payments and the change away from cash into straight digital and cryptocurrencies, it required a different way of us to think about money and to think about actual cash. Because when cash itself, like a piece of paper, if we give that piece of paper to somebody, our brain shows our pain centers light up when we pay in cash. When we pay with a card, we don't lose anything. We get the card back. And so often we'll just boop, 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 boop. We'll play like a symphony of boop, boop, booping without really paying attention to what we're spending, how much things are costing, or we'll just think, oh, I'll just get an apple from a vending machine. I'll get this or get that or whatever. There were studies that showed, I think it was something crazy that I can't really remember so clearly right now because I've been a little run down for a whole week. But if you allow digital payments on a vending machine, apparently it's something like 11 or 12% more that's spent per purchase. And that's quite a lot. Like, if you're thinking about spending $100 and you spend $110, you do that 10 times, you spend another $100. Like, that's the type of small thing that is known by a great personal finance guy who talks about his very own style on YouTube a lot, Dave Ramsey. He calls it death by 1,000 cuts. And that's an old expression that is very relevant to digital payments and this whole arena. So I decided that I was going to launch MoneyMind.global. It's being built right now. You can visit the pre-launch website over at MoneyMind.global because I couldn't get MoneyMind.com. But also because it's live broadcasting and because it is online, reaching around the world. I wanted people to be able to access it globally, and that's why it's also MoneyMind.global instead of another ending, right? So I also am an international person myself. I am English, Polish, Nepalese, Chinese by ethnicity, and I grew up in Hong Kong, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So I'm a very typical global citizen of the world by upbringing and background and experience and exposure as well. So global just made sense to me. We're all in this world together. We all have a responsibility for it. And MoneyMinds.global is part of my way of saying this is how I want to give back with my life and my time and my energy and give back into the world so that other people's lives may be somehow improved as a result of the time that I'm spending and the commitment that I'm making to just raise awareness, really, of this issue, of the fact that if we don't get on top of our own personal finances sooner than later, we'll end up spending years kind of making messes. And a lot of us find in our life journey, as far as I have noticed from talking to a lot of people, there seemed to be a common theme of people saying, I wish I'd known this younger. I wish I'd done this younger. And while I fully think that we have to accept the journey that we have taken because that's what we needed to grow through at that time, instead of being mad at ourselves or instead of like feeling regret, which is a very heavy emotion to carry around on top of, having to make new decisions. I feel like if we can just forgive ourselves and let ourselves think we made these decisions for whatever reason we made these decisions, and that's what we did at that time. And now we can make different decisions while accepting that we made those decisions for those reasons. So I decided to try and help support people to at least have exposure to what I think are the basic pillars of financial stability or money stability. And those are the 5 pillars of MoneyMind that are money mindsets, savings, budgeting, investing, wills, and legacy. Now, I did a lot of research into this area on my own financial journey because I started out working in media very young. Then I was a workaholic and just had a lovely career in that area, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But at the time, I was like, wow, I feel like I'm doing a lot of avoiding of basic things like budgeting or personal finance, or I was kind of investing, but just throwing things at stuff that I believed in. And I didn't really have a strategy. There wasn't any structure. And I felt that I couldn't seem to find one from bank people, from anyone. It was really hard to get a simple structure that I could use, understand, or be able to recognize. And please don't get me wrong here, okay? So I have always loved law, and I was doing my own contracts with help and guidance from really influential people in my life from when I was like 19 years old. So it's not like I couldn't read the contracts or I couldn't make sense of them. It's that this whole area was really convoluted. And so I ended up feeling one of two things. One, I'm stupid, even though I can somehow manage to do all these contracts and stuff when I'm 19. But the other thing is, I'm bad at maths. I have dyscalculia, so I'll always be bad at money. And that was so wrong. Because if you're bad at math, it doesn't matter. We have calculators. We don't need to be like math geniuses in order to be able to be good at money. Money's completely separate. It has numbers in it, but it's almost entirely at the beginning level about our behaviors. And that was really great for me to figure out and get my head around, because for some reason I had thought that even though I was making money and somehow managing my money and doing stuff with my money haphazardly again, I was just always going to be bad at it. And that kind of belief can cause us to make different choices with our money, or be a bit hopeless, or just make wasteful decisions that, will align with us being not in belief with ourselves. You're half Asian and horrible at maths is what Brian has just said. Hi, Texas. So it is about behavior, and that is what I want to promote with MoneyMind and these 5 pillars of financial stability, because the 5 pillars that I talk about are money mindsets, savings, budgeting, investment, wills, and legacy. And I found that when I went on my journey, my own personal finance journey, and then I was with my husband and we decided it was the right time for him to go into joining this incredible, or co-founding this incredible startup in the financial services industry. I realized in that journey that I was very emotionally stressed by the fact that I had all these knowledge gaps that I hadn't tended to when I was younger. And the stress brought them onto the surface. So then I said, okay, what do I need to make myself feel more secure? What is it that I'm missing? And I created the 5 pillars because I did a lot of research and a lot of reading and a lot of like compiling all this different information saying, what are the basics that we would need to be okay in terms of starting our financial journey in confidence and then being able to make our own decisions, right? We're going to have to make our decisions all the way along. No one can ever make our financial decisions for us, which is why often financial advisors or things like that, we'll have to be with them or we'll have to sign something saying we give you the right to make a decision for us. But it's really down to us legally in every way. It's on us. And we have to accept whether that money grows or is lost or whatever, because it's our money. We have to look after it. Like we have to look after our other possessions in our life as well. So these 5 pillars of money stability are money mindsets, savings, budgeting, investing, wills and legacy. And we'll just go through those really, really quickly because I found that this stable pillar foundation thing worked so well for making me feel more secure in our journey that I realized, wait a minute, maybe I want to share this with other people. And we went through this over the past years. So when I applied it and then I started to get good results, that's when I realized, oh, maybe this is a thing. Maybe this is something that I should actually take and share with others because this effect, I have gained so much from it that I think other people might be able to not necessarily fix their own financial situation, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anyone else's financial situation, but if I had known all of these were this simple, I could potentially have made quite different decisions along the way and just kept in alignment with these 5 and made sure that I was on top of it, given my personality with money, like that I'm a spender instead of a saver, or that I am, I'm when I'm stressed, I spend more, or that I'm inclined to be quite high risk in investments and how to counterbalance that if I want to be doing that. So it's really interesting to see our own style, to get a feel for it. So if we were, for example, so I'll just go over these really, really quickly and I'll just touch on what we would potentially be able to do if we chose to in different areas. Money mindsets. Here, and I talk about this in the bigger course that will be available on moneymind.global when it's finished. We're still testing, oh my goodness. But this one, so yeah, Brian is saying he was a very impulsive buyer when he started working at 17 and that he's gotten better with his money, but needs to do some investing homework to see about stocks or whatever area. Money mindsets. Do we have fixed or growth mindsets? Do we believe that we can learn new things on our own, or do we believe that things are how they are? So we essentially want to recognize what we are. I was very fixed mindset earlier, and this comes from anywhere. It comes from our background, our upbringing, or everything, blah, blah, what we're exposed to. And we can choose. The only way to change this is to start considering different ways and start practicing different thought patterns that are more open than closed. So this is mostly fixed or open or growth mindsets. And we want growth mindsets generally because it means that we see, for example, if we had to learn something, fixed mindset might think, I need to learn this to pass the grade. And a growth mindset may think, I need to learn this because this is valuable for me to take a step up and to move onwards. So you'll see that difference in, for example, what we think of when we study at school. I need to pass the grade, or I want to learn this to do better. And those are 2 different styles, fixed mindset or growth mindset. And when we have growth mindsets in our adult life, we can definitely climb further because we can feel like, oh, wow, we can constantly educate ourselves in new areas that will benefit us. And we can choose those areas, right? We can choose whatever we want. So mindset's really important. So Brian, we would cover the the bills and the credit card and the debt in the savings and budgeting area. But if people are watching this and they have quite a lot of credit card debt and are interested in different opinions in this area, then Dave Ramsey on YouTube talks a lot about student loan debt and credit card debt and ways to get out of that area. There's also someone else called Natalie Bacon who has a very different approach to credit card debt and student loan debt. And she talks about it very, very differently because she had student loan debt, and she thought, okay, this is just debt that I have that's kind of like a mortgage or something else. It doesn't mean anything about me. But she decided to just, consider it separate debt and then work out of it and have a strategy where she was working and also investing and saving and that type of thing, which is quite different from like Dave Ramsey's strategy, which is to clear all debt as far as possible and essentially dramatically cut up all credit cards and everything like that, which is a different way of looking at it. So those are two different ways that two different people, Natalie Bacon and Dave Ramsey, talk about bills, credit card debt, and how to manage our finances. So mine is neither, because mine is not advice. Mine is only talking from my own personal experience, and it's a lot more like easygoing. Really, all the things in these pillars are pretty much the simplest, most like easygoing. If you don't want it to be super stressful to deal with your finances or have some really dramatic life changes, a lot of people will want the drama. A lot of people will want a big change and that dramatic shift into the life that they dream of. And this may not be this. Like Dave Ramsey might be able to help you with that. Natalie Bacon is a life coach. She may help you to get your head in a different space and do that. Those people are like platform launchers. Mine is a foundational thing, saying here's what I have used and is a foundation. And if you know these things, then hopefully they will help you choose what your style is in comparison to my style, right? So I'm putting what I do out there so you can say, oh, I like that, or I don't like that, or I haven't even thought of that, or that's horrible. Whatever you like, because your money is going to need your style and my money is going to need my style. And so this is where I feel that sharing information and sharing different styles can be helpful, and why I'm doing this at all. So with the savings, we would probably want to be allocating whatever savings we can towards our goals and knowing what savings we want to be allocating. So this would tie quite heavily in with the budget. Generally, we'd want to be probably saving definitely every month. And we would want to be saving maybe like 25%, whatever it is that we are. So we would, if we're a spender, we may have a different savings amount allocation to a saver. And we will be asking whether we're spenders or savers. We'll be asking if, when we were young, we liked to keep every dollar and we don't understand buying random stuff, whether we like buying and the experience of buying. And so we're exchanging our money for those experiences or for those fashions or for those beautiful things. And it's just good to accept our personal style. And keep in mind that the savings, we are saving for our future. So if we're avoiding saving or we are not saving, then we are essentially just avoiding our future. And we're avoiding taking responsibility for creating our future. And this is something that we can benefit from recognizing, whether we're avoiding creating our future or whether we are fearful of creating our future, and look back at the money mindsets and look at these two and say, how am I thinking about my savings? How am I thinking about my future? How am I thinking about retirement? How am I thinking about this stuff? Because if we have fixed mindsets, we can sometimes feel like it's terrifying. Like there's just so much and it's so big and it's so like, because we're in this fixed space, outside of that space is different to this fixed space. And we feel like this is how it is, and changing it will be very stressful. Whereas if we're in a growth space, we're like, oh, I can totally change that. It might take some time. It might be stressful, but I can totally do it. And that's where we want to move to or be at. So it's really important to keep an eye on how we feel about stuff. We want our money stuff and our savings to just be a no-brainer. Like every month, this much goes into this like savings allocation thing. And I don't even notice, or I don't even think about it. Or I do start to think about it after just allocating money towards it and then thinking, oh, maybe I should start looking into where that's going, where it's being saved, what kind of cash is being saved in what type of format. Now, with the savings thing, what we want to also remember is depreciation and inflation. So if we are just stashing money in a bank account, it is losing money. So it is slowly deflating like a balloon. It's like losing air every single year if it's just sitting in a bank account. So we want to be having our money growing more than 3 or 4% inflation every year. That's just a general rule. And so we want to try and put it somewhere that it's at least close to that, or that's why we invest, to make sure our savings is doing something that will grow bigger than 3 or 4% per year, hopefully. So that then in the future, we have our nest egg that is growing bigger over time instead of deflating over time. Because we will need to, when we're old, take money out of it that will cause it to deflate, and we want it to have something putting in. We want the interest in things to be putting in so that it is also growing. So we're taking out a little bit, but it is also continuing to grow. So we don't want it to be deflating and we're taking out money and then it just is gone. So that's what we want to think about with savings. I know this is all a jumble. Thank you for listening and for paying attention. I'm not entirely well today. So that's with the savings. With the budgeting, this and this will also be tied together and the investing thing will come last. So we want to really look at our money mindsets, our savings and our budgeting, and know where we're at with those, as well as probably just getting a will done, because you can just do it in like an hour and then it's done. But those three, you want to have them sorted out in terms of, you're not going to be an expert in this area, but you're going to be like, I know what my money mindsets is. I'm comfortable. I know roughly what like my plan is or my ideas are for moving forward with savings. And I know what type of budgeting style works for me, doesn't work for me, where my money's going. So the budgeting section is going to be essentially one of the most important parts for people who are spenders, who have credit card debt, or who are not on top of where every dollar is going. And there are different budgeting styles. I like the concept that I have created, which is more modular for growth. So that is called the 25% concept. And that is that there's 25% for savings, 25% for spending, and then 2 blocks of 25% for necessities, rent and necessities, that type of thing. So essentially, that is equal to 50% rent and necessities, and then 50% spending and savings. So if we were a saver, for example, we might say, but we don't spend that much on spending, or we don't spend that much on rent and necessities, in which case we could then separate it into having 25% savings, 25% investing, 25% necessities, and 25%, savings, investment, 50% spending, something. Wait, no. I need to not be doing this one today. I do it in the course and it's much more comprehensive. I have examples of these each different things. Like if you're a spender, you could categorize it like this. If you're a saver, you could categorize it like this. If you have debt, you could categorize it like this. If you are a student and you have no bills or very few bills, you could categorize it like this. And today is not the day. So I'm just going to leave that one and say, let's just go into where the different budgets could apply to our lives, right? So, the way that we can consider this is there's a 25% budget that I completely botched in terms of examples, but the general rule is 50% that we aim roughly for. 50% on rent and necessities, 25% savings, 25% spending. So this would mean that it's something roughly to aim at. If we look at where we are today, we could allocate our money and say, yeah, wow, I'm spending way more on rent and necessities, or I'm spending way more on spending, or I'm spending way less on savings. And then we can use it as just a benchmark, right? So that's a benchmark to use. So the other budgets that are very popular that I have not created are really good to keep in mind too, because spenders may love the zero budget, which is where you pay all your money to necessities first, And then you pay all the money to savings first, your allocations, sorry. And then you pay whatever else you want to discretionary. Wow, I'm really not very well. I have a bit of a bug. My brain is not working. And so you have there then the necessities allocated, savings allocated, spend the rest. And that means that you always have savings and you always have your necessities covered. So you would have, I'm creating something for the website that will be quite useful for this type of thing. You have a monthly planner sheet and you write out what your upcoming like necessities will be. And then that is allocated straight out of the paycheck first thing. And then the savings amount, whatever it is that's manageable, will be allocated next thing and then spend the rest. So that's how that like no budget would work. Another budget, so that one is quite good for people who don't want to feel too constrained by like having to micromanage the money. Another budget style is the 30-20-50 budget, which is by Senator or Harvard bankruptcy expert Elizabeth Warren. And she created this to help people break poverty cycles. She said this is what to aim for to break out of debt or poverty cycles and just keep working towards it, which is 50% necessities, 30% spending, and 20% savings. And we can mix that around based on where we're at with our numbers, but kind of roughly aimed towards it. So we may end up hitting like 60% necessities and 10% savings, but we're still aiming for those types of numbers essentially over the long term. So adapting to any type of budget will take 3 to 6 months to start. And then it will start to get smoother and we can start exploring different styles. So I've explored a whole bunch of these different budgets, and these are the ones that I find the most commonly useful or mentioned online and in other places. So the other budget is the strictest budget, which is the zero-sum budget, which you allocate every single dollar to whatever it is that you want to spend it on, and the end number is zero. And so then you do that. It's a very high discipline budget. It's really great for people who aren't natural, flamboyant spenders. And for me, it's too disciplined and it's too restrictive and it doesn't work, even though I'm a very, very organized person and I love the idea of it, but it just doesn't work. And I have tried it multiple times through different periods of time, and it causes me to kind of bust out and go shopping or spending or something. So the restriction is too much. And that's really important to know. Will this budget work for how I actually am, not how I want to be? Because if it is how we want to be, we'll be struggling against ourselves as well as struggling with a new budget. And we essentially want to be letting ourselves be how we are and trying the first steps of something new to see if it fits. And then if we like it or don't like it, that's okay. We can try something else. We can try this for a little bit longer. We can see a different way of doing it or a different style. But it's important for us to really keep in mind accepting our own style and personality, however it is. Even if we're spending energy beating ourselves up for having made past decisions or having regret or having emotions around money, that can take up a lot of space in our emotional stress space that we could be spending elsewhere, like accepting that things are how they are, and now how do I change them without feeling as weighted down by the burden of my own emotions around this thing? Because the thing is a stressful thing. If we have debt or we have not enough money or things like that, that's very stressful to carry, and that stress on top of the fact can be really debilitating. And I am an advocate of recognizing these emotions and tending to them and making sure we address them and look after our wellness and our health, while also recognizing that if we can separate for money to be money and for us to say, I don't need to carry as much weight or stress around it, I can potentially focus more on the actions. And I will still probably feel a lot of stress, but I will focus not on the stress. I will focus on the actions. The stress will be there, but if I focus on it, it will feel much bigger. It's like watching the news every day. You will feel really stressed out if you watch the news all the time every day. The world is a completely chaotic place if you watch the news every day, because you aren't shown the good things that are happening. And so there's no counterbalance. There's just stress. News is just stress. I don't know why it's not called Stress Channel. It's relevant, it's important, but we don't need to watch it all day, every day. We need to know, and we need to focus on our actual life, which is not in the television. It is out here doing action things in our life. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And it's easy to fall into that trap because it's there, it's available, it's urgent, it's pressing. This is also urgent. Our life, our actions are also urgent and important and frankly more relevant than whatever is vying to pull us away from attending to our life. If we need to be doing things that are involved with things that overlap with news or relevant events or things like that, that is for us to do in our life and apply in our life as it happens and as we feel suitable. But if we aren't going to be involved and we don't want to be involved or feel that it is beneficial to our action in our life to be paying lots of attention to something, then it's our choice what we pay attention to. And that is something really important to keep in mind in terms of our own stress, our own financial stress, our own credit card debt, our own student loan debt. If we're constantly worrying about it, that weight can cause stress that can reduce our ability to have stronger action in certain areas. So focus is really important. Tuning out negativity and focusing on what's more important and asking what is more important. So the phrase ignorance is bliss, I'm not necessarily condoning that, because we can know about things while not engaging in them. And saying, I can know about this and not have my emotions suddenly dance with this situation. I can know it, have my opinions, have views, and say, okay, I've noted that, it's important. This is an important thing. But I don't have to feel suddenly a flare-up of stress around this thing. I can get my credit card bill and I know I have debt and I have this bill and I can see it, and there will be emotions come up perhaps for some of us around that. But I can say, I don't need to focus on that stress and emotion right now or avoid it. What I need to do is I need to recognize the emotion is there and focus on what action I can take next. And that is a good way to start to help support ourselves to move through stress cycles in our life that can be caused around money. And this area of budgeting can be very stressful for a lot of people, because a lot of us, like when I was younger, I was a money avoider. I was still, making money and spending money and just avoiding budgeting, avoiding the discipline. I thought it was like really disciplined, but really if you just are not in debt and allocating towards necessities and savings, then it's quite simple. If you have debt, then that's something to unravel, and that's something to grow through unraveling and figuring out, what is causing the debt, if it's avoidable, if it's not avoidable, how to address it, how to minimize whatever damage there is caused by it emotionally and financially, and move through it as smoothly as possible, taking action towards that goal without tying in too much emotion if we don't want to. So we know we can choose. So the budgets are quite useful to be able to both fix these situations in our life over time, over like a year or more, but they're also very useful to look at ourselves and really start to see our money mindsets come clear. Because how we feel about budgets and how we budget will be a direct reflection of how our money mindsets are. Can we do this? Can we not? Is it stressful? Is it not? What is it? So then we can ask, what is our budget? What is our money mindset? And start to say, okay, maybe I don't actually need to be stressing out about the budget. Maybe I can just start by tracking my spending. So when I track my spending, all I'm doing is I'm just taking a list on my phone, on a piece of paper, whatever, and it's just daily, everything that I spend in the day. I don't need to do anything with it. I just track. So I just track. Today I spent $5 on coffee. I spent, $10 on gas. I spent this. Track it. And then at the end of the week, you just tally, at the end of the day, you tally the amount. And at the end of the week, you just, in another column, tally the whole amount. And just keep doing that for like 2 months. And then you'll start to see the numbers add up. And you'll start to see, oh gosh, I'm spending a lot on coffee. Or I'm spending a lot on whatever. Actually, there's Brian, there's something that I'm creating, which is, I've lost the thing, but is actually just a tracking expense sheet. And it has the columns in there. So I'll be releasing that with the MoneyMind course as well, which will come in the bundle for the MoneyMind course. For anyone who wants to use that, and it's editable on your phone, it's also printable, and if that's a helpful reference for anybody out there, because the way that I do it is that, well, the way I started doing it really, because I no longer do it like that, is that it has the date. Oh, crap, what's my thing? I was using it for my teen mentoring. I do teen mentoring on weekdays. But it's got my brain today, it's got like the date and then the description of the item, then a little column saying whether it's a need or a want, because I want people to be able to differentiate between the two. Then your phone. Okay, so it's just an editable PDF. So you can use it on your phone, you can use it on your computer, you can just type into the document. It's just a 1-page thing, not complicated. And then next to the need or want thing, where you put a little tick, then you have the amount spent. Then there's a column for the day's spending, where you put the amount for the day at the bottom. And then at the end, there's a running tally, which is just the day will total there, and then every day will just add on to that running tally. So you'll have the amounts that are items, then that day, the next day, and the running tally will be all the days added up together. And then you start to get really offended by how much you're spending on coffee. She says, having totally done that and been so offended. I'm like, I don't even like coffee that much. I really don't. Now I no longer drink it. But when I first started doing this budgeting thing, I started with expense tracking because I was so, I felt like, okay, I'm not gonna, whatever I'm trying with different budgets isn't working, because I'm just too overwhelmed and I emotionally spend. And when I get stressed, I spend. And the budget thing isn't working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start expense tracking. That's it for 2 months. And I'm not going to make any changes. I'm just going to expense track. Let me tell you, after a few weeks of doing this, I was like, oh, I want to make changes. So what happens when we just, but my house is more affordable because I don't really care about coffee. That's the point. When I started to do this expense tracking every day without making any other changes to my financial life, I started to see, oh, I actually don't like that area very much. Why am I spending money there? And suddenly I became more selective in my spending. So then instead of Starbucks or Folgers or Maxwell House, I'm like, do I even need coffee? I'm pretty hyper as a person. Why am I even drinking this? I don't even like the flavor. It's just because I'm there and there are cakes, and then I just did it for no reason. I had no reason. I don't love coffee. If I loved coffee, that would be completely different. If I loved having an iced venti grande frappuccino with unicorn dust, that would be super different. That sounds amazing, but I'm not into that. And frankly, I've never really drunk coffee. I just started to because I was there in Starbucks walking past it and they had nice cakes. And then I looked at the amount that I was spending on both the coffee and these random cakes and then a nut bar that I could eat later. And it was more than I was comfortable spending. I could buy those nut bars from the supermarket in a bulk pack and just take one in the day. I started to realize, wow, I am quite happy buying rings. I'm quite happy buying other things. Shirts from ASOS, because I don't buy designer brand clothes anymore because I'm like, why would I spend on that? But I started to become selective. And then I started to feel confident that I was like, wow, this is actually my behavior changing. And when I realized, I remember the moment when I realized I was like just writing in the day's expenses without thinking about it, without any emotions, without any judgment, without the judgment or feeling guilty or feeling anything, is what really changed it for me. I noticed I was just writing and it was a habit. And that was really the pivotal moment. I remember where I was. I was in Causeway Bay. I was walking out from this shopping center and going past a little golf store and just jotting down in my little, I had a little like book Filofax thing. My friend was really into it. So I was like, oh, I used Filofax in the old days. And so I just jotted it down in like my little notebook. And that moment I realized this has become a habit to track what I'm spending. And I no longer have the emotional engagement about it, about some kind of stress, about my judgment, about not being good at this, about not being good at money, about anything. And that was suddenly the changer, because then I started to make progress in other areas, slowly. But it suddenly disengaged that emotional judgment that I had been carrying around for ages and made me think, wow, I can actually do this. This is budgeting. This is the area I thought I would never be able to have the discipline to do, or these other types of budgets I was trying to just inflict upon myself were totally failing. And I was like, this is starting to work. Finally, it's starting to work. And so the expense tracking, I kept going. Then I started to look at where I wanted to be more selective. I just cut out all the coffee, saved myself loads, and didn't really care. And now I don't even drink coffee. Like, I wasn't even drinking coffee because I really needed to drink coffee anyways. So I realized that that budgeting process for me and for possibly many other people who are avoiding budgeting can be the first step towards taking charge of everything, because the confidence that we can get knowing that we can just track our money, and we can, oh, thanks, Brian. We can just track our money, and we can just be okay with tracking it and not doing anything else super different with it. Because we often will think, and I thought, I need to be really good at all of this, like really suddenly, and know what I'm doing and be on top of it with my investing and my saving and everything. And I didn't. I just needed to take the next step from where I am now. So, well, not now, where I was then, the next step. And that was tracking. And so that tracking became so much easier. I still track. I have a budgeting app called iExpense, and I use that. We no longer take as many photos as before, but before I was taking like all the photos all the time. And I was, yeah, like it was a full, okay, because it's more memory reasons. The memory was starting to get really overloaded with all of these receipts. But now we take photos of important receipts. Like, we don't take photos of necessarily like topping up our octopus card because it's there showing on the balance. But I will log that number, and I will log all the other expenses without taking the actual photos of receipts. But if I make a purchase of something that's like a physical thing, then I will, that's not like a piece of stationery or a pen or something, like say like a candle, something, maybe I may be put in the receipt. But it depends, right? It's something, if I think there'll be a problem, if I think there is some need to have that receipt in case I'll ever need it again in future. So this can be really useful if you catch like taxis, because if you leave something in the taxi, then you got the taxi receipt. So that type of thing can come in quite handy, and has done in the past. But now I use a great app called Hong Kong Taxi, so that's right there on the record as well. So a lot of things are becoming digitized, where we don't actually need to have hard copy receipts. And also the amount of paper was getting quite stressful. I was like, we don't need to be taking this many receipts. Like, it's all good and well, but but this is a lot of paper. So sometimes we just, we don't need to print this extra paper for the world. So those, just running through those, I know I've dealt a lot on budgeting, money mindsets, savings, budgeting, investment, wills, and legacy. In the investment part of the Money Mindset course, we only cover just an overview introduction of saying this is a complicated area that really can be done really uncomplicatedly. And it's not advice. None of this course is advice in any way whatsoever, because I have no qualifications to be able to give advice, and I wouldn't anyways, because that isn't helpful, really. I think empowering people to be able to make their own decisions is more helpful than telling someone, do this, and then, we will see whether it's any good or not. And that's because I don't have the expertise in that area. If an expert's telling you, do this, then, like an expert sports coach is like, you need to do more of this. You're like, okay, I will trust your experience, but I still need to make the judgment to go ahead and do it. So this area, I just talk about investing just generally, and how investing is really just putting our money aside so that it will beat the loss of like real depreciation, and inflation. So when we're investing, we want our money to grow bigger, but it doesn't need to be like super drama llama or super exciting or anything. There's something called buy and hold investing, which is just long-term investing. And some people are a big fan of that, right? Some people are big fans of buying not just, companies or, how do I say this? But there are things like bundle deals, like ETFs or tracker funds or things like that have a number of different companies inside them, that follow a general like economic area. So you'll have like consumer discretionary or like the internet, right? Internet, the growth of the internet or whatever. So this, like, say if you go to like etfdatabase.com, there's a list of all these different ETF categories that are like bundles of these many different companies that are there growing in the world. And if you go to see a a financial planner, they will often talk about what the right style is for us. And we will need to know our risk profiling questionnaire, which we probably talk about a little bit in the savings part too. Our risk profiling questionnaire, we can be done it for free in the bank, and it will show how comfortable we are with different types of risk. So it really depends on whether we're comfortable with very high risk or much lower risk. And sometimes it's up to us to decide, am I a very high risk person who also wants to have a counterbalance of very low risk investments so that I can have that weighting of both. So if you want to learn a little bit more about like model portfolio, investment portfolios, you can just Google Vanguard model portfolio. And that's just open information that they say, here are some of our model portfolios. So these are different models that if you have like a low risk profile for a risk, then here's the most like risk-free of our portfolio models. Here is the next most risk-free, and here at the bottom is the highest risk of our model portfolios, and that's what it will kind of look like. And so in this investment area that we talk about in MoneyMind, it will just cover what I call the cabs categories, which are like a taxi cab. They'll take you where you need to go. So the cabs categories that a financial advisor may mention on your investing journey are cash, alternatives, bonds, and stocks or equities. So the cash is cash, as whatever we deem as cash and whatever we will know as cash in the future, right? And this can be fiat or it can be digital or crypto, whatever. But cash is cash. It's liquid, accessible. Cash alternatives is anything that's not bonds or stocks. Okay, so that could be real estate, that could be gold, that could be random other investments that we have that are not bonds or stocks. And then we have the bonds or stocks, and the bonds are like loans to governments or big companies, and then we have the stocks, which are stocks or like shares in a company, or a brand or like a conglomerate, something like that, like Procter and Gamble or like Disney or something like that. So those are the categories that are what we think of. And then it's up to us to decide and get advice on what weightings and what style we'll choose and what suits us best, right? What is our personal style? So I think, like different people will have different styles. Brian has said that he uses Robinhood and he's been thinking about gold. I think it's really important for all of us to be comfortable educating ourselves in different areas. And for my personal style, what I look at in my own style, which may or may not be relevant to anybody else, but I love to, and cannot give advice, but I love to look at the benefits of something and the downsides. And I will look very strongly into both. So I will look up articles and do full searches on what are the downsides of Robinhood. What are the problems? What are the downsides of gold? What are the problems? What are the upsides of Robinhood? What are the problems? What are, what are the upsides? What are the benefits? What are the upsides of gold? What are the benefits? Like, and also, what is relevant for me now? And what do I believe in terms of putting my money? Would I put my money behind this? Would I be comfortable with my money here? Or is this something that I have heard from somewhere? Is this something that I have learned from my parents? Is this a decision that's mine or something from somewhere else? And I will check that in myself and make sure that I'm making a decision that I feel, yes, I learned this from before and I'm comfortable making that decision now, so I will go ahead and do it. And so that in the investing area is more like, I talk about not necessarily like actual investing or areas of investing. I just say as an overview, a very, very vague overview. Here are some rough categories that will be talked about by a financial advisor. And here's why investing is important in our life, especially if we are just stashing money or we're spending a lot on credit card debt. Like usually our credit card debt will be so much bigger than our investing gains that it is worth clearing debt before investing. Because this area is worth going to last. If these areas aren't cleaned up, then it can just be one of those haphazard cycles that can go on indefinitely, really. And if you've got like 20 or 30% interest on a credit card and you're only making 8 or 12% in a good investment choice, then that's a big difference. Right? That money's going out. This money may be coming in, but it's not even liquid. And so it's like, oh, is this a good balanced strategy for me to have in terms of gain? So for me, I would personally in my life spend a lot more time educating in investing and reading about stuff than I would actually investing. So for me, I would personally subscribe to things like thebalance.com, or there are other things like Morningstar. Get Rich Slowly is a really good blog. And there are loads of really great blogs out there that talk about things that aren't very, for me, my personal style is very like slow and turtle-like and like buy and hold. And I'm not impatient. I'm not into reacting when other people react unless other people are freaking out and then I buy. But that's totally personal preference, right? Like people's styles will be completely different. And I love educating because the more that I know, the better I know myself and the better I can make my own decisions and judgments based on what I feel will work for me. And then be true with those choices. I'm like, oh, okay, I lost that money. I haven't, but like, fine, I lost that money on that. I'm happy to have done that, made that choice, learned that lesson, and I'm happy for that. I'm not happy that it was gone, but I don't feel like, oh my God, this was nothing to do with me. This is out of my control. This is little fixed mindset. It's always somebody else's fault, right? I look at it like I made this decision and I know this was risky and I accept responsibility. What can I learn and move on? Right? Is this, a crazy sector? Was that just way too high risk investment? Am I comfortable with that? As long as it's our own decisions, there will often be a little bit more comfort. While if we are relying on other people's choices or decisions or advice or recommendations, right, it will often be really uncomfortable when we lose that, if we lose that. And we're quite happy, interestingly, to be super happy when things go well. And then when things go badly, we will blame everybody else. And what we would like to do in my mind, ideally, or what I want to do, not for anybody else necessarily, but what I wanted to do is I want to feel good and decent about my choices either way, good or bad. And that for me is quite important because that responsibility is part of that confidence of being, in touch with your own money style, choices, and future as a result. Because blaming other people is only ever going to keep us in situations that are potentially uncomfortable, right? If we have that blame game that we are playing. When we can take responsibility for more and more and more areas in our life, we start to really empower ourselves to be able to say, this may actually be completely out of my control, but I'm going to somehow see it, turn it, or use it in a way that is helpful or useful to me. Because life will happen, be hard, difficult, but I'm not going to turn against myself. Because if I can't be on my own side, then I'm not going to win at this. This isn't going to change because it's in me. And because bad stuff will happen. The only thing I can affect is how I react to that stuff, how I do things differently. And I have only made this journey from being a really fixed mindset, very like things happen to me, kind of victim mindset type of mentality, which I really didn't realize and had, frankly, all of us have very legitimate reasons for having these ways of thinking. We've been through things that make us think that this is valid. We have been victimized. We have been through experiences that are stressful. We have lost and been at the mercy of bad things happening. And I realized that the way that was making my life feel was not how I wanted my life to feel. And that the only thing I could change was how I looked at it or thought about it. And that's how I started to realize that the money mindsets pillar was number one in the most important thing to change. Because otherwise we can make loads in the rest and that will just somehow find its way out. It will just go away and we'll be left feeling bitter and resentful. And yeah, it's this money mindset pillar will make the biggest difference to how we experience all the rest. And the savings and budgeting will make the biggest difference to how capably we invest as well, in terms of being on top of it, not in terms of like being an expert at it, but just, knowing that we are comfortably good with these areas will make a big difference to how comfortable and capable we are in this area. And the last area is wills and legacy. Wills and legacy, if you're over 18, you just need a will. Go to a lawyer, get it done properly, put it in a legacy box in your office. That's it. Otherwise, there can be months or years of probate that your family has to deal with, and we don't want that for our families because we love them. So over 18, just get a will. It's pretty simple, and just go to someone, pay a few $100s, and they'll just do it for you. Whatever jurisdiction you're in, make sure that it's relevant for you. And the basic will just have your executors and your beneficiaries. That's it. That's all you need. It's a very short document if it's a really, really simple one. So it doesn't cost that much, doesn't take that much time, and it's done, and then that's easy peasy. So those are the 5 pillars for money stability that we talk about at MoneyMind.global, and that's money mindsets, savings, budgeting, investing, wills, and legacy. And those, if they're helpful to you, I am glad. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining and for having more stimulus for this discussion, especially in certain areas like approaching credit cards and savings and budgeting and investing. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you everyone who leaves comments or reacts to this or watches this afterwards. I'm Raven and I will sign out now, but thank you for joining for this chat about personal finance and the money stability, the 5 pillars of MoneyMind. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Bye, Brian. Bye, everyone.